Hi. This is going to be a postmortem on my game Puppet Play. So if you haven't played it, there's a link in the description that you can download it and play it. Or if you don't want to play it, I'll put a link to the gameplay playthrough, which is pretty short. And you can just watch that and get an understanding of it. But yeah, let's just dive into it. So this game, it was originally made to be a part of a weekly game jam. The prompt was Puppet, and I was really wanting to get into game jams so I could, start beefing up my portfolio. But, well, not but I asked some coworkers, I asked an artist, I asked a programmer, and I was like, "Do you guys want to help me out on this idea?" I pitched them the idea. The idea was basically a dad would try to would be playing puppets with his daughter, and over over time he'd be trying to finish up the puppet show, but you would see a change in his daughter because she's actually growing. So in the beginning she's really young, but then slowly she ages out of it, and that was what I pitched, but it was obviously so much. So after like the first day, like when I wrote the script, and I'm like, all right, let's just start on level one. Like, if we could get to the other stuff, okay. But if not, let's just focus on level one. And even with focusing on level one, um, we kind of got close that it was done, but there were so many bugs in that first week, like completely just unpolished and a lot of problems. And so, we tried to finish it up that next week, but that didn't work. And we kind of went into a slog for a while. Like, no one's worked on it, not even me. And then, I eventually I almost gave up on it because it was so close. Like, getting that first like 80%, 90% is actually pretty easy, but then getting that last 10% is so difficult because it just feels like it's like everything's tied together by glue, like Elmer's poop glue, not Gorilla Glue. And so a lot of the problems do stem from like it was originally supposed to be a week, but then it took like 6, 7 months actually to finish it. So in this game, I'd say probably the biggest feature is the cutscene manager, because this game is a story. It's trying to be a story, right? And so the cutscene thing didn't take me too long to actually mash out the details. Um, let's see. So basically, what I did for the cutscene manager was I have a cutscene script, right? So this one's labeled cutscene 1, and underneath it are a bunch of timer events, which is a script I made, and basically it plays every single thing you see right here. So this first cutscene, it's triggered by, I think, the start of the game. So if you see the action button right here, that's basically it causes this cutscene to happen. And then when that cutscene happens, it goes to every single event. So it goes to hide main menu, then it goes to start game, it brings up dialogue, there's a dance, and then more dialogue. Um, and so the system, like, it's really flexible because, it's doing all sorts of things in here. And if you see there's a bunch in here, the whole game is done through this cutscene with timer events setup. But there's a lot of problems with it, I'd say. Um, not the worst system ever, but if I did revisit it ever again, I would spend a lot more time in the beginning focusing on those problems that I figured out towards the end. But because it was the game jam, like I spent like 2 days on it, and then I slowly patched it up when there were problems, but I didn't revamp it at all. But some of the big problems are, so I did my own timer event thing, and it's basically it's like a wrapper for the Unity event, but it's got two parameters. It's got an event argument, which is a string, and it's got a timer. So if you want to delay something, like dialogue is delayed by 3.75 seconds because the dance happens, and I don't want dialogue to happen instantly after. And there's another problem with that off the top, and I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, so the big problem with this one is Unity events usually have parameters right here. And if you don't know what a Unity event is, it's an event where you can link in an object and point to any of the object's functions. So for this one, it's play dialogue. And Unity, and what distinguishes it from like a delegate function, a delegate event, I mean, is that a Unity event you can change in the editor, whereas the delegate event is only in C++. So that works great for a cutscene thing, because I want to do it all in the editor. But the big problem with doing the timer event is I never figured out how to get the parameter, because I'm inheriting from a Unity event, timer event. I couldn't figure it out, so I just said, alright, let's do one event argument of a string, right? And the big problem with that is if you look at something like the Princess Ambush trigger, which spawns in enemies, you can see I have a vector 3 right here, but it's a string, and then in code I have to parse that string into a vector 3, and the code needs to know that, like, it's a very static system. Like, spawn enemy knows, alright, vector 3, but it would just be way better if, for something like, for anything, like if it's an int parameter, it's an int parameter, not a string parameter that is parsed as an int parameter. And that was just that's unfortunate, but I managed to work around it at least, which was the most important thing. But yeah, there was definitely some problems with that. But yeah, I'm happy with it because it worked. I got all these cutscenes. Like, I can even move the camera. I could move an AI through commands. Like, if you look at it, this moves the princess to 6.16 on the X axis. So it worked, but it's a bit ugly. But I really do like how it's all Unity events. That, for me, is the great part about it. And then there was just some ugliness that happened, honestly. But yeah, the cutscene manager was the most important part for me because I'd say like the combat in this game, unfortunately, isn't the greatest. I did have some problems with animations and getting that to work out. And I did hash it out and made it so much better than where it was. But there is a certain point where you just gotta say, alright, this is good enough. I need this game to be done so I can add it to my portfolio and focus on other things. So there is a point, like, I could have made it better, but I spent a lot of time on that in those last few months just polishing, fixing bugs. So yeah, the cutscene manager is the big part of this game, I'd say. And there's like triggers throughout the map. I don't think, because the first cutscene's triggered by the action button, but if you see here, there's a green trigger right here. That's a cutscene. That's a cutscene. So it's all linked up through triggers. Certain things can be triggered by killing enemies, which is cool. So like if you kill these first two enemies, it triggers a different cutscene. And I made this kill event so it has a list of all the living, and then it'll start like cutscene 5. You see right here, it'll do cutscene 5 if you kill all these enemies. So I didn't really even have to change my cutscene system much. I just had to add a kill event, had to add some like notification things when you killed an enemy, and then checks, and it worked out great with the cutscene system. So while there were problems with the system, I did manage to make it work for this little tiny game. Um, so yeah, that's like the biggest part of the game. I talked about the combat being a bit lackluster. Let's see, what else? Oh, one other thing. So in the beginning, I noticed some things like with the art. Um, Not the style. I like the style. It's really simple, which fits like this aesthetic of a dad trying to make a show for his daughter. So like the simple uh, topology of like the trees and the grass, I think it works really great. And the simple texturing, it really works in the favor of the game for sure. Especially with the game jam, right? That's like, you know, that's the huge thing that influenced the project. But one thing that I didn't like say, hey, can you do it this way? Was because of the jam. I'm like, all right, it's fine. I'll work around it. Was that like these? If you look at these platforms, um, they're not modular, right? Like a modular platform would be, um, you'd have this piece right here without this. But if you look at it, it's hooked up. It's all one piece. And that's just a big problem for platforming, because if you look at this piece, this is really becomes really apparent, is that it's all tied together. So my design, like no, my programming had to work around this instead of like I had to make sure my jump was tailored to this height and then also tailored to this height. Um, and it would have been nice if I could have moved these chunks easily. And it would have been really easy for me. I've said something about it, but like in the beginning, I'm like, all right, gotta save time. I'll work around it. But towards the end, stuff like that did become a problem, just because pacing-wise, I feel like there's a problem with the platforming in this game. Like it's really simple. It doesn't really get advanced, and I would have liked to have done more advanced stuff where it's like, jump over here, then jump up, and then stuff like that. And then I would have liked to have combined right around here. So you face enemies after done platforming, which, look at this section, really simple. I would have liked after this first section of enemies to have done enemies but on platforms. So you have to master platforming and beating enemies. So it combines, the past section of the level and makes it more difficult. And I do think that made a big problem with the pacing of the combat and some of the more fun stuff. So that's why I feel like when I talk about the story, that's the specialty of this game, because the pacing of the combat is just a bit lackluster. And like immediately after you kill these enemies, there's a cutscene, and then after walking a bit out after it, there's a cutscene. I feel like the cutscenes are not too frequent, but there's just not enough time in between them. And I think that having more platforming sections, more enemy sections, and more modularity would have really helped me with figuring out that pacing, because I played the game a lot and I noticed like, oh, this part isn't that fun, and it made me really just rely on, hopefully, my writing can shine, which it's decent, and the cutscenes can shine. But it was very yeah, it took me a long time to get the cutscenes all figured out. But yeah, I'd say that's probably the big things with the game. Postmortem wise, I'm proud of it, but the combat is lackluster. The jumping is lackluster. It's not bad though. You can play through the game with it fine, but if I had to, I would have liked to have made that a lot better. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the game. There was a lot more stuff, obviously, like the actual dialogue popping up. That was a big process. Oh, and one last thing. So one last thing, I promise. So just going back to the cutscene thing, the dialogue. like, how do you store it? So I originally wrote a script that looked like a legitimate script. You know, it talks about like the setting. It has the you know uh, it has all of it, and I ended up copying it into a dialog.txt file, and you know I had to delete all that description stuff, all that exterior stuff, um, all the fluff, and just get the dialogue purely there. It would have been great if I had come up with a system where it knows, all right, this is dialogue, so that I don't have to. Like, if it wouldn't be realistic if someone's editing the actual script, and then you have to copy it all, and then delete everything. Like, it would have been better if you just copy the script over to a text file, and then I parse it. So that would have been great. But one of the big problems is that in the beginning, through my cutscenes, I used to say, and it's probably still here as the actuality of it, is, let's look, dialogue. Okay, so this dialogue says play dialogue, and it has an event argument of 2, which used to mean play 2 lines of dialogue. But I don't use that anymore. If you look up here, it says 0. I deleted it off of these 2, but I didn't delete it from any of the other ones because there's a lot of, dialogue prompts. But yeah, so it used to say play 4 lines of dialogue, and that was a huge nightmare for. Let me just pull it up. Wait one sec. So, let's look at this. Yeah, so if you look at this text file, it used to not have any of this end of dialogue stuff. Instead, all the dialogue was there, and I would say, all right, for the beginning, play 4, because you can see it. I had 4 dialogues for the beginning. So this one would say play 4, and then the second one would say, there's a lot in there. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. It'd say play 9. And I was constantly revising this dialog.txt file. So I constantly had to if I make a change to the first one, it's just a cascading effect. Sometimes when you make an edit to one, now you have to update all the other ones. And that was just a huge pain. It was terrible. And what I ended up doing was I added this end of dialogue prompt. Not a prompt, just this comment, right? And then when I'm parsing, alright, I figure out, alright, the first 4 lines are part of a chunk. So whenever I say play dialogue, it's going to play that whole next chunk. And this works so much better because now when I make changes to the dialogue, existing dialogue, right? If I make changes to this one and I add like a new line, right? Like, now I don't have to change my number from 4 to 5, right? So that was just a huge win that I ended up doing, and it didn't take too long, but that was the biggest change I made to the dialogue manager. But that was a huge part. But there's problems with it. But problems more from development, right? Because if I say play dialogue chunk, if I say play dialogue, if I move my characters, like if I move this guy all the way to the end because I don't want to go through the beginning and I just want to fight these enemies here, and I get to the next dialogue section, it's going to play the first segment of the dialogue. So, which is confusing in the development setting. But it's the development setting, so you're okay with it. But the best option would have been to have tied those chunks into specific IDs. And then I say play dialogue chunk this one. That way, if I'm developing, or this one problem I had early on was that you could jump over these enemies and therefore you could skip the kill events. which would mess up all the order of the dialogue because you skipped the dialogue chunk. So I added these gates so you can't jump over them and get past them without killing them. So something like that would have been fixed if I had just done my play dialogue chunk at index 5, right? Or, a specific index like 0654 XD, hexadecimal, whatever. Um, so yeah, that would have been great if I had fixed that, or if thought of that. But you think of these things after the fact, and you're like, let me just finish the damn game, because if I keep on changing things, I will never be done with it. If I can't just accept this isn't perfect, then you'll be working on it forever. So that's a big thing just to learn from this, like how hard it is to finish that last 10%, how hard it is to let go of something because it's not you know it's not perfect, and it's so hard to not it's hard for me to tell myself it's okay. you know um you're only one person programming on this with the help of another person who stopped programming towards the beginning. And um yeah, it's you just gotta let go of certain things, and you gotta be like, this is as good as it this, like, for the bang for my buck, the time I spent on this is good, but the time I will spend on it to get it, up to here, or up to here from here, isn't worth it. And that's just a big thing. This is the first project I've finished since after school, and I do feel like the quality is actually really good. I got some great 2D art from the art director at Farsight Studios. I got some really good 3D art from um, a friend at work, and I do feel like the polish is really good for what it is. It's a really short game, so it's crazy that I spent half a year working on like a game that's 7 minutes long. But I do feel like the quality is good. There's AI, camera stuff, you know, jumping. I did so much of the gameplay mechanics, and yeah, I'm ultimately proud. But thanks for watching this, and hopefully you enjoy the game. If you play it, let me know what you think about it, design wise, um, or any of the systems. But yeah, thanks for watching.